Now, I've been speaking to James Elder, the brilliant James Elder from UNICEF, who is in Gaza right now. And obviously, every time I've spoken to him, it's been, well, educational in every sense of the word. It's one of the best communicators we have in terms of someone in Gaza telling the world exactly what's going on, the humanitarian catastrophe that has enveloped the Palestinian people in Gaza. James, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. You're obviously in Rafah. I can hear a drone above you. Can you just explain, just so everyone's aware, what's going on there?
Yeah, the drones haven't stopped. And I mean, I'm very conscious. This is 250 days of this for people. So my last two nights have been sleepless. The first night was a very, very heavy bombardment. I thought I knew what that sounded like. This was someone banging pots next to your head. Last night was a drone. It's pillows over your head, everything you try. It's a lawnmower right next to you. People here have had 250 days of that. The psychological trauma that people are being pushed into, like enforced chaos. So yeah, in the last half hour, Apache helicopters firing, many explosions, and then these drones, which are armed drones, but also surveillance and some kind of psychological torture. And again, 8 months of this for people. It's as many people have told me, Owen, it's too much. I have now had these heartbreaking moments of sitting with young people, many of whom have lost loved ones, have lost a brother, a sister, and have said to me, enough. I want a missile. These are quote unquote. I want a missile to hit me tonight to end this. To have people forced into this. Into these positions. I mean, this is a bleak spot on humanity, and of course anyone who pretends to have any power of this, and clearly those who do have power on this have no concept or no caring of the suffering that these people are enduring.
Can you tell me, since you got there, since you returned, and you've been obviously in and out of Gaza, but can you tell me what you've seen that people really need to hear, what you've been seeing with your own eyes?
I think Tuesday was a very telling day for me because I was at Al-Aqsa Hospital. Again, your viewers know we have seen the systematic devastation of a healthcare system. We've also seen the devastation of agriculture, of an education system. I think it's 95 professors now being killed. We've seen the devastation of housing and homes, devastation of an economy. But a healthcare system. So we've got a handful of hospitals out of 36 that were fully functioning, a handful. Al-Aqsa Hospital was packed, was overcrowded before Sunday's operation, rescue, massacre, call it what you will. So when I went there on Tuesday, 48 hours later, Owen, of course it's a war zone, but I'm walking with doctors over children with the wounds of war, children missing parts of their limbs, children with horrendous burns, children with those. But a bomb blast picks up everything, right? So it picks up tiles and bricks and obviously shrapnel, and still these children there. And again, as a doctor said to me, what other evidence does the world possibly need? So I'm there, I'm sitting with a doctor, I beg your pardon, a father, whose 11-year-old daughter, he had not left her side. He said he hadn't stopped crying, and she became conscious, and this spark came across his face, Owen. And then the doctors explained they doubted they would operate. They believed the shrapnel was too close to her brain. These things are everywhere. This is day 250 for these people. I walk outside and a woman is in. I mean, the way in which people have been deprived of everything, including dignity. They hold on. There's a human spirit here that we must talk of. But here's a woman whose home has been bombed. Her husband has been killed. She's got 2 young children. She's in tears, asking for a tent. She's asking for a tent so she can put it up on rubble. The idea of the denials of this, whilst I don't think we've seen a moment where there's been such an outcry around the world, but it's matched by this impunity. So I'm struck, Owen, by the level of hardship being forced upon people. But yes, I'm still struck on going to Nasser Hospital that's somehow been rebuilt. It was a shell 6 weeks ago. It's a fully functioning hospital. That human spirit, that resolve, that determination is immense. But my goodness, there are efforts 24 hours a day to destroy it.
I mean, just in terms of that medical system, because we've seen hospitals, medical facilities attacked. We've seen doctors, nurses killed, arrested, patients obviously killed as well. I mean, how is that medical system functioning, coping, not least with the enormous need? I mean, that's including people who had needs, people with cancer beforehand, and now just constant new injuries, children with severe injuries. How is it coping?
It's a great question. So I guess when I'm at these places, obviously I'm struck by these incredible healthcare when I'm at these places, I'm struck by these incredible healthcare workers who are doing 24-hour shifts. At the same time, their families aren't safe. At the same time, they're trying to think that night, how do I get water and wood for my family? This is a trained 7-year doctor. How do I get wood for my family tonight? So for me, I'm watching this incredible human acts, and I think it's coping. Obviously, it's not. You cannot have this level of devastation. I asked a doctor, what supplies do they need? This is part of what UNICEF does. And he simply said, there is no hospital in the world that could have enough supplies to deal with what we are dealing with. So they don't cope. Anyone who has standard illnesses, as you say, diabetics, cancer, the number of people dying with these things, they don't go to these hospitals. It's not safe to get there. If they do, they know highly likely they can't get the treatment. Al Shifa was a world-class hospital. It has been decimated. So they're not coping. They are being held together by a resolve and a spirit of these people and these medical staff, many of whom have not been paid for many, many months. But to think that they are coping, it's like the humanitarian response. Everyone is doing their best. Aid workers have been killed in numbers we've not seen since the advent of the UN. But to say the aid response was anything other than a band-aid on bloodshed would be untrue.
We can just hear the explosions there. I think it must be much louder, obviously, where you're standing, but just so we're commenting on what we can hear there. I mean, in terms of that operation on the military operation on Saturday, in which huge numbers of Palestinians were killed and maimed and injured. I mean, can you just say about that? Because many politicians didn't mention that at all, and many media outlets didn't focus enough on that. I mean, what was that human impact? I mean, you discussed it slightly already, but just so people are aware what the consequences are of that kind of attack.
Yeah, it's a great. Consequences are that a Palestinian mother, like a Palestinian mother, like a mum from Australia or from South Africa or from the UK, has every bit the same love and desire to protect her child, and that's being ripped away from them. So these people who literally they saw the sky light up, they saw hell in front of them, and this from every single corner it came, from the sky, from the land, from the sea, and hundreds of people reportedly killed. And the idea that that can be overlooked somehow is a normalization of horror. We cannot possibly normalize the scores and scores of people being killed. We can't normalize, Owen, this idea that people live in a constant sense of fear, much less that there is nowhere safe. So what happened over the weekend, we've said many times, you've said, everyone who is decent has said, of course the hostages should be home. This is abhorrent that they are somewhere here and that they've been killed and that they were taken in the first place. But a child's life is a child's life, and to see so many people, to go to Al-Aqsa, I will go to Al-Aqsa again tomorrow, and I know I will see beds emptied, or at least the children who were there are no longer there because they have been killed. So what we saw on Sunday, what we saw last night, is again an utter disregard for civilians. Whatever the military aims are of both sides, it's been clear to UNICEF, and they've said it many months ago, this is a war on children. We don't say that for a headline. We say that based on evidence, based on numbers, based on the idea that when we look at Syria and Afghanistan and horrendous conflicts that hit children, the numbers of children killed and injured here eclipse those in ways we've never seen before. Yes, this is a densely populated area, but it also speaks to the indiscriminate natures of the attacks. And Sundays was a prime example of that.
Can you just explain exactly what, as well, you've seen with your own eyes, civilians being killed as a consequence of military action?
Well, most recently on Wednesday, an aid delivery, a very important aid delivery. UNICEF, we were taking a truck of medical supplies and nutritional supplies for 10,000 children to the north, to Gaza City. There is a very laborious process to go through to get those approvals. Those approvals are given by Israel as the occupying power. They have a legal responsibility to facilitate the delivery of aid. We know there's a war of words. It's on record. It's very clear. There have been many, many obstructions, denials, and restrictions. In May, we got half as many trucks in as April. Okay, it's an important truck. 10,000 children will benefit. Oh, and it's about a 25, 30-mile round trip for this aid delivery. It took us 13 hours. We spent about 8 hours at checkpoints or near checkpoints being held. In the end, This truck for 10,000 children was denied despite every piece of paperwork being done. It had to go back. We will try again, but those children and families right now won't get those medical supplies and nutrition. And as we waited, we took the coastal road. I spent a lot of time just watching fishermen, Owen, because I've been talking to a colleague. You talk to anyone here, and the reality is so much more intense than fiction. And he was explaining to me that his father-in-law, over 30 years, had built fishing boats. He built 5 of them. When they were bombed, fishing boats, of course, wood and fuel, he had photos and they just burnt. His 30 years of work burnt. His father-in-law had a stroke at that moment. So I'm sitting there watching and I'm thinking about, again, the devastation of economy, the devastation of agriculture. And I'm watching about 8 fishermen, men, they're probably university professors and engineers, up to their knees, each one with a net fishing. I was there for hours, as I'm saying, because we were being denied access. And I'm watching, and then suddenly a tank is coming down the road. We get back in our vehicles, and the fishermen flee. And a little bit further up on the beach, 2 fishermen are shot as they run. One is shot in the back, one is shot in the neck. I know that because we saw them up close, because I was also with World Health Organization and a paramedic. They radioed to the officials to ask permission to try and give life-saving aid, not knowing the situation. That was denied. It was denied that we get out and give that. And so these fishermen who were trying to get some food for their family, eventually body bags were given by the United Nations to their fishermen, their friends, their family, I don't know. They went to the beach, they gathered them up. One of these fishermen still had a fishing net trapped around his leg, and they brought them up. And that's where I saw where these 2 men had been shot.
I mean, I know you're not there to be in the politics and legality of it, but so we're clear, I can say it. That's a war crime, and a very, very straightforward and horrific war crime for you to have witnessed. I mean, just on the medical aid, what was the denial? What was the basis for the denial?
No reason given. No reason given. As best as I know, I was listening to radios. Now, that radio call, I was on the transmitter, but the person who made that call was on a different channel, so I didn't hear. But generally, you would not get a reason. Certainly, for example, in the same mission, our truck, you're not given reasons. So smoke and mirrors, I simply don't know if a reason was given or not given. Certainly, I wouldn't know what reason would be given to shoot 2 unarmed fishermen who are fishing that day.
And I mean, that has knock-on effects as well, doesn't it, for the humanitarian situation, because that deters people from going out and fishing. Although I know people in such a desperate situation, people will try anyway. But in terms of just the aid, I just wanted to ask you about, again, not to get, you're not there to be at the politics of it, but Israel keeps saying that they are allowing unlimited aid into Gaza. I'd say in gross denial of the actual reality. But when you hear that, if I say unlimited aid is allowed to get into Gaza, what's the response based on what you see?
My first response is to calm my brain and get into a diplomatic language, because I'm so exhausted by the words and words being used and the war of words versus the reality on the ground, and then to segue into the evidence that yes, in May, half as many trucks got in as in April, half as many, and April was not enough. We're already on that sense of an imminent famine. So May, it was many less. Why did that happen in May? If we keep looking at language, that happened in May because of a quote unquote limited offensive in Rafah. That quote unquote limited offensive in Rafah is the same one that led to 1 million people who'd already been pushed out of their homes, probably had their homes destroyed, 1 million people being pushed away again. So I'm very conscious of the language being used. And as you know well, there are also very clear statements made where we do have on record what's happening. But it's unfortunate that we get into this war of words, because no, the reality is, despite the United Nations' best efforts and aid workers here in trepidatious times, and we know that more aid workers have been killed here than any time since the UN, and we have very brave partners. It gets denied, it gets blocked, and at other times it's just games, though, and there is an awareness that we can't deliver aid at night, so we'll be held for X number of hours, knowing then that now the sun is setting, so now approval's given, we have to go back. So my example on Wednesday was that supplies, medical and nutritional supplies. We already shut stabilization centers for the most critical, well, they were shut when the military offensive happened, for thousands of critically injured, critically unwell children, malnourished. So these supplies are life-saving. That truck didn't get there. That happens time and again for 8 months.
I want to put something by you, and I'm sorry to have to rate his name, Elon Levy, who was the former spokesperson of the Israeli government, and he was responding to a journalist who I've corresponded with in northern Gaza, who was speaking about the famine in northern Gaza, and he responded, the whole Gaza, this is Elon Levy, the whole Gaza Strip is 25 miles long. If there are food shortages in the north, you can walk 20 minutes. The 20 minutes, then just let's disregard that. 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 miles, 25 minutes. I didn't even know what he was talking about. But when you hear that, just walk. That's what he said. Just walk from northern Gaza and get some food.
Yeah, the several problems with that. One, of course, if you were to try and come south, there is definitely more food in the south. People don't have money. A lot of people don't have money. I meet people every single day in tents with heartbreaking stories. They're intense and it's brutally hot. People might say, oh, they're used to the heat. Well, they're used to the heat in their home. They're not used to the heat. Their home is being destroyed. So there is more food here. People don't have the money. You can't walk from the north to the south because there is a military checkpoint, and you absolutely cannot do that. In the north, we've seen the systematic devastation of greenhouses, of agriculture. So there is no food production there of agriculture for chickens and so on. It's been smashed. UNRWA, the backbone of the aid response here, has been unable, I think, for many months now to take food to the north. So again, the evidence is sadly very stark, because the evidence also speaks to a nutrition crisis among children. You've got parents doing their best. One of the saddest things I think I've seen, Owen, is that parents now know that they can't protect their kids. And children also, they look in their parents' eyes and they know that they can't protect them. For a parent to realize that, as a parent, if you know you can't, the level of fury that must bring, but then the resignation, and that's the bombs from the skies. Then we're talking about night after night, your child only getting one meal. I think it's 9 out of 10 children on the Gaza Strip are missing meals.
I mean, one of the most shocking, well, it just stayed with me, the South Africa submission to the International Court of Justice was discussing how parents couldn't hide from their children that they'd lost control. I just found that a really shocking statement.
Yeah, same, and I've seen that, and I've heard that, particularly children who are a little bit older. A 12-year-old has said that realization when she saw her dad, right? It's, you know, her father, who was just that mountain, a physical soul, but also he was a community leader, and so that's a hero for her. And when she just suddenly realized, after the family home had been destroyed, and I think they were displaced 3 times, she suddenly realized, yeah, my father, my rock in this world, can no longer protect me. That realization, I don't know what that does to a child psychologically. Physically, of course, it's meaning that the child's right, that your dad can actually no longer protect you from the armed drones or from the disease on the ground, because we're denied the ability to fix sanitation and give water for people to drink.
James, we often hear about so-called safe zones where civilians go, they're safe for military operations. What's the reality there?
Yeah, from November, when this term was first used, it was very dangerous, because we knew on the ground people were being killed in designated safe zones. So it had to, the idea of unilaterally declaring a safe zone as well is illogical. Beyond that, there is a legal aspect to a safe zone. It's got to have food, water, medicine. None of these things were provided, Owen. Yeah. The Rafah offensive, it was warned about for so long. We knew it was going to happen. There were months to prepare sanitation and toilets and water for people. None of that was done whatsoever. So no such thing. But in the most stark sense, beyond no water and food, is when people are in safe zones and bombed. When I got back this time, talking to a friend I'd made, a very dear friend, Omar, and I've met his whole family. We've been to the north, his family's there. I'd met them, his mum, his 2 brothers, really just salt of the earth people. And I hadn't been aware, and I asked him how his family was, and James, you don't know? I'm like, no, Omar, what do you mean? They were in a safe zone in the family home that he has built. As he said, I had a better job. That's what you do. I put my life savings into it, and my mum and my brothers are there. He got a phone call from his brother saying, I think mum is dead. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm under the rubble now and I can't hear her. So his mother died. His brother was killed in that. His other brother, as they were reeling 2 days later, went back to the family home, which had been destroyed. But hey, it's a home. There are things there. Maybe there's photos, maybe there's clothes. He went back to the home, his other brother. When he went back to the home, it was struck again and it killed his other brother. That's a safe zone.
The English language really isn't equipped to even describe the horror of this, really, is it? Just a couple of final questions. I mean, you mentioned in terms of, for a long time was this focus on, is Israel, the red line for the US, will there be a major operation against Rafah and so on and so forth? Can you just expect, because most of Gaza's population were in Rafah, and now they were displaced again. What's the impact of that? And also that point you made is actually what's really not on people's radars, the collapse in aid distribution since that Rafah offensive.
Yeah, so people have moved. Deri Bala is called the middle area of Gaza's in three parts: the south, Rafah, Deri Bala, the north, Gaza City and Jabalia. Deri Bala is heaving. Deri Bala has raw sewage down the streets. You've got, middle class families now living in a tent with sewage running through. Al Mawasi was the only area in Gaza that I at least knew of that was just sand. It's a very packed place. It was sand for a reason. Nothing grows there. People are forced there. It's 45 degrees in a tent. I know that. I've tried with a thermometer. So people will think, oh, they've moved again. Yeah, but they've moved again to a place that's not safe. They've moved again. Their coping capacity has been smashed that little bit more. Their psychological safety net has faded at that additional bit. So ever more important for us to get aid. But the Rafah crossing, that southern point, was the lifeline for humanitarian aid, and that's been closed. So that has dealt another lethal blow. And I hear myself talking, feeling I can't convey what those families I'll go and see in tents today, and there's a prideness and humility to people, Owen, but they're on a precipice, a physical and a psychological precipice, and somehow we have to imagine that despite the outrage around the world, this thing is continuing. Now, it doesn't mean people should stop. I think they should double down, but for those people here in tents, yes, some hold on to hope. Others are starting to hope for the worst.
Just a very final question. The dehumanization of the Palestinians takes many forms, and one I don't think is discussed enough. And that is, I think people basically start thinking of Palestinians as almost, they can, they're used to this. This kind of level of horror and misery is just part of life in a way it isn't for us. And therefore they can cope in different ways, in ways that we wouldn't be able to imagine. And I just, in terms of, like you say at the beginning, circle back, a child is a child, and a Palestinian child really is no different. It's no different from any other child in the most unbelievable, hideous, apocalyptic nightmare, which has gone on now since the 7th of October, and we're now on the 14th of June. The impact, these are just kids, and that's your focus. Just tell us, what is that impact? How can we best describe to the world what that impact on those kids is?
Yeah, unprecedented. We don't know. We're in uncharted territory. There are those children who I speak to who want it to all be over. There are those children who may not recover. The only way to get out of this is for this to end tomorrow, and the most immediate recovery. Gaza is not a place for children right now. It is hell on earth. Sometimes it's burning hell on earth, but it is their home. Oh, and so no, we are in an area in terms of the mental health of children. It's not just mental health, it's a mental health crisis around the world. I understand people might say, well, we've got that crisis here and there. We do, and we should address that. But what we are seeing here is also a population, they cannot leave. They cannot leave. They're seeing attacks like they've never seen before. They're seeing denials of food. They're seeing, as we said earlier, their parents be totally unable to protect them. So when it comes to a young child population, this has long-lasting impacts. If we get into the objective territory of what a demographer or an economist will tell you, the ability of this young population, if we get it right, give them the right skills, the right training, my goodness, it's a hard-working population. Yeah, that is the resolve they've got. I would crumble here. They don't. But you need to get those skills in that market, that job market opportunities. This is the exact opposite of that. This is the antithesis of that. So an economist will tell you this young population can be a demographic dream, a demographic dividend. The flip side of that is a disaster. And we are humanity is knowingly heading, indeed pushing these children further and further into that chaos.
James, we're so lucky, both in terms of the channel, but more generally to have you there in Gaza, in terms of being able to just communicate the horror. I said the English language isn't equipped, but you do manage to use the English language to the best possible ability to just convey the horror that we see. And it's so important the world hears this. The world needs to hear this. It's important people don't move on from this. It's important we don't normalize this. That's always been something we've spoken about a lot on this channel. This can never, ever, ever, ever be normalized. UNICEF do amazing work. I'll include the link to UNICEF as ever so people can donate and support. Please spread this video, share it everywhere, post it to families and friends. Make sure everyone still is talking about Gaza and the impact this is having. Likes, comments. But James, honestly, really, really appreciate your work. We're incredibly fortunate to have you. But I know the expression is stay as safe as you can, which is what everyone is supposed to say to people in Gaza.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Thanks for everything, Owen. Thanks for your audience as well.